SolarWinds is kind of here in the United States. I don't know, it still is, but it was the #1 until it got hacked. Have you heard about this product of this company? SolarWinds is, and I believe it still is. It was before the major hacking event. The major vendor for network monitoring and management here in the United States. This is expensive. And let me just find you the hack information, because if you bring this up, probably one of your students know about the hack. So let me show you this so you whatever it is, because this is one of those things that organization uses to do what we're talking about. So you go SolarWinds hack, timelines. This was a major one. If you're not familiar, in a nutshell, this is the one that they found Russia hacking to SolarWinds code, and SolarWinds distributed the code to other clients. So if you read about this hack, this was a major thing. See, the threat actor accessed SolarWinds. A company discovered. Then there, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff. This one was a major one. This is the one that, when this talk about security, when you look at this, I remember some of the security specialists. This one, they got into the kitchen. Literally, they were on the kitchen, and luckily they didn't do anything. This was a major blow into in the security of a lot of organizations, including government. So I bring this up because when I bring SolarWinds, probably some of us still have heard about that, and they're gonna say, "This is the one that got hacked." Yeah, this is the one that got hacked, but the reason why it was a major impact, because this company was used by basically the big guys. All the 500 companies, they use something like this. They got products like Orion for network management and system management. See, all these are IT security. So this is just one product. The other product that I like to use also is PRTG. This one got a free trial to do what they're talking about here, PRTG. This one is free. You can download it for 30 days and use it. Very easy to use. But the whole point is that these tools, normally you're gonna find it on a network, because we wanna do this. Monitoring and management. I mean, you look what SolarWinds claims to be here, IT management software. See, this is where, so if you're in a school, you probably ask your IT department, do you guys use SolarWinds? What kind of software do you guys use for logging and monitoring, right? Because this is like a big thing. And why we need to do this, because this one is a big one in terms of the concept here, is that we want to monitor the device. We want to monitor. We want to lock down the system. We want to have reporting. So this one right here has a lot of things that we'll try to cover in the next 15 minutes. But basically what that is that the first section here we'll see it is some features of Cisco routers to protect the operating system. Another feature in the configuration to auto secure. Basically, you run this command and just inventory your configuration. It says you need to turn this off, 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 off. Kind of like a checklist. This should be off, 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 off. Right? Then if you do routing, you guys done CCNA and we talk about OSPF, dynamic routing protocols. Well, we didn't talk about security when we did that, right? So we got to talk about security now. How do we secure this? How do we access the routers? In-band and out-of-band management access. How do we configure the logging? The time is very important. And SNMP. So let's just try to focus it on some of this. So this one right here, It's just Cisco specific. And you can run these commands, secure boot image and secure configuration. And basically what they're going to do, because short of time, I'm not going to be able to explain in detail, but basically what they do is they're going to protect the operating system and the, your configuration file. If you read through this, what is the whole point of this? In the event that someone get into your system and try to erase the flash and then reboot the router, so reboot with no configuration, someone like, say, I'm just going to wipe your hard drive, so to speak. Well, they prevent that one because they're going to have a copy. Think about, you know, how laptops, they have like a recovery partition. Similar to that, let's create like a recovery partition and put a copy of the operating system there. So in case of someone by accident or intentionally deletes the operating system, we have a copy. Same thing for the configuration. That's kind of the idea there. This one right here is that how do we move files in and out of the router? Well, you probably learned on the CCNA that we use TFTP, right? Trivial File Transfer Protocol, to back up the configuration and to, well, the problem with TFTP, that is clear text. Again, someone intercept that communication, they can grab the whatever you're moving the configuration and grab it. If there's a secure way to do this, yes, using secure copy. So you are like in a Unix environment or things like that, you've probably seen this. It's called secure copy. And basically you can move files using SSH, which is port 22 and encrypted. So you can enable this application, and basically you're gonna see a lot of these AAA. We're gonna explain this in a minute. So you see that AAA part of this. But in a nutshell, that's what that is. Secure copy is to be able to move files in and out of the router or the switch securely, as opposed to use TFTP. Okay. So they talk about how we're gonna configure it, right? And then how do we recover the password? And this is in case that you lost the password of the router. How often that happens? Often enough that we have to use it, because a lot of times routers are not those devices that we log in all the time. A lot of times it's like your home router. How often you log into your home router? Not very often, right? Same thing with a lot of times routers and organizations. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes you just configure it and they're good there for years. And then, oops, I forgot the password. But also you gotta think about like someone trying to break in to get into the system if it doesn't know the password. All it requires is physical access. And basically what it is that you wanna set it up that when you start, you break into the boot process equivalent to the BIOS in your computer and tell them, change the boot mode. Like when you're doing your computer, that you want to boot from a thumb drive, you want to boot from something else. Well, one of the options there on the router is when you boot, you can tell them, do not load the configuration. Do not load it. Basically, start with the defaults. That's what this does. So basically, you get into what is called a break sequence, which is a mode that allow you to change this through the command line. And then when you get into the command line, you type this on it. And the default, so you know the default is 2102, which is, they don't tell you here, but it's 2102. That's the default, because we got to put it back. So 2102, and there's a history of why we use this, but now Cisco don't talk about this in their curriculum. They feel that it's not that important for you to know this. This is the register, and every bit is a 16-bit. That's something with the boot process. These are 16 different options. So we changed one of the bits to say bypass the configuration. That's what it means. So when it boots with default configuration. So you can get into the privileged mode. So you're in, then you can load the configuration. See, that's what it says here. Normally we go what? running a star, right? Now we got to do the opposite, from the star into the running. So we load it. Once it's loaded, we can change the password. By default, the interface is going to be shut down, so you enable the interfaces. And this one, they don't tell you how to do it, but you have to put the register back to 2102. The whole point of this is that if I have physical access to a router, it just takes a reboot for me to break it. That's it. If I got physical access for a router, I bring my laptop, plug in the console cable, do a power cycle, and that's it. I'm in. Whatever it takes to reboot, that will be the downtime. Because when it reboots, I can break it. So that's why they talk about physical access being important. Because everyone knows Cisco, they work with Cisco, knows this. I can bring my laptop, plug in the console, power cycle, the router, I'm in. Without erasing the configuration, without making changes, just I can get in. So that's what they talk about there. So one of the things that you can do is prevent this. Don't do that. No service password recovery. See? See? Do not execute this command without a plan for password recovery. So you can say, don't allow this process if you really want to consider about people breaking in and stuff like that. So it has to be like a secure network where you're concerned about someone breaking in physically and do that. So what I'm thinking about here will be something like, let's say you have a branch office and the router connects remotely to your corporate, and you're not so secure about the physical security in the branch office. So you may have to do this just in case do that. So that's what they talk about the password recovery. Questions on that part? This one is how to secure command, and basically you run a command and it's just gonna, or before that one, there's these two protocols. It's called discovery protocols, and they're part of the CCNA. Very useful, very useful. Cisco discovery protocols and local link layer discovery protocols. We use them all the time, especially with phones. Your IP phones use this to find out the correct VLANs and things like that. So this is something that we use inside the network quite often. And if you got phones, most likely you're using either CDP or LLDP, depending on your phone system. But the problem is that this won't allow you to exchange information without any authentication. So basically, they're like neighbors. If I'm connected to you, it's like saying, hey, I'm Angel. Who are you, Rene? And tell me something about you. Like what? What do you want to know? Your operating system, your IP addresses, your software version. So I can use this to hack system, right? Because I can just talk to you and get all that information, figure out, oh, you're using version 15.53, and what is the vulnerabilities for that, and so on. So what I recommend is, yes, those are good internally, but externally, turn it off, disable it. See, the intent is to make it easier. Should be used with caution. Edge devices, turn it off, have this disabled. So that's basically what we're talking about. So you can go and see this, and they talk about how we can do that. Now, there are other features there that you want to turn it off. And this is kind of the default configuration. And they say, well, use this command, auto secure, and it will go through it and disable the stuff that you don't need. Kind of interesting that Cisco hasn't come out and said this as the default. They want us to do it. So this is kind of the stuff that you can do auto secure and just locks it down. So you'll do some of this stuff. Routing, we learned on the CCNA that the routers can talk, can create adjacencies, and exchange routing information. The problem with that is that I can bring a malicious device to pretend that it's a router and do that too. And inject raw information to your routers if I want to. Because we can just talk, right? I can be on an OSPF router and I can look at the packets and figure out the area zones and just communicate. So what they want us to do is, because those are the problems, we want you to put passwords, authenticate. So in order for a router to create an adjacency, a connection to another router, they have to have the password. So this is the part that CCNA don't talk about it, but if you're gonna implement an OSPF, that's what we do. We use authentication between routers. That's kind of standard nowadays. And the way that it works is that they introduced here Cisco the concept of keys. Now, why they use keys? Why don't you just put a password? Well, they do keys because they think about the process of replacing the keys. So allow you to have like multiple keys at the same time, so you can do transitions of keys. So sometimes they're going to refer as a key change. So you can say, I'm going to have like these two keys. You can use any of those two keys, because keys can have expiration sometimes. Or if you feel that has been compromised and I want to change it, I don't want to just remove it because you may get disconnected routing part of it. So I want to have a transition part of it. That's why they got like keys. And then the authentication message. So there is a lab that will go through it and set this up, right? You put it on the interface, you put the key number 1, using the encryption MD5, and then it says, we're going to use this IP OSPF authentication message dias. And that's, you're going to do the same thing on the other router. They have to talk. This one is standard. So it doesn't have to be just Cisco to Cisco. It could be Palo Alto firewall to Cisco router. They work. Questions? Now it's a lot of information. Let's just finish it here. It's getting the 2 hours. So you can also increase, as I said, you create a key change, create a stronger encryption. The problem with message diets is that it's considered weak nowadays. So right now, Cisco, that's why I said, okay, back in the 90s and early 2000, MD5 was good. So we were using it for authentication, for encryption. We got to move on from MD5. Now we're going to do like SHA-256 for hash. And that's why they're giving you these options. Right? Using that, using the key change. So there's some labs there on to do this, and also some packet tracer to do this MD5. And this section here about the management part of this is that we want to secure the access to this. So out-of-band management is like using the console. In-band is going to be using the network. Very important that we collect the syslogs. In this section, they talk about how we could actually be collecting the logs. One of the things about the logs is that Cisco has a very small storage for the logs. So what we have to do is figure out where the logs will go. The device can send the logs to 4 different locations. The buffer, which is inside the system, which is very small, completely small for today's standards. We're talking about that it can have probably 20, 30 lines of code, very small. Not good enough for today's systems. It can be sent to your console when you connect with your laptop, but you have to be there to see them. Or it could be sent to your SSH session, but again, you have to be connected there. That's the terminal. What we want to do is send it to a server so it will be collected, right? That's the syslog. That will be sent to the server, and the server will collect it. Now, should I collect every single event? Should I collect every single alert? It depends on your scenario. So that's why they set out levels. The default is notification. That's kind of where we get started. And we get emergency, everything below. Alert, critical error, warning, notification. If we want to get information, we got to change the level to 6. Information will be like port down, port up. That is not critical because it's expected, like in a switch, that maybe the computer get disconnected or get disconnected. That's just information, right? Notification will be something more significant, right? Failure, attempt to log in, or things like that. And then the rest are more like warnings or errors. If we want to do debugging, which is really detailed, we go all the way to level 7. Debugging, normally we use them for troubleshooting. So we can set the level of this. And the way that we start is when we start collecting the logs, if you collect too many logs, it's not really good because then you say like the real alerts get lost. So we got to see a way how the system is going to be processing the technical part is how your syslog is going to be processing the logs. Is the syslog server just going to be collecting them, and then you have to go and you view them, which is what you're going to be doing on the lab. And the lab is just collect them, and then you manually have to go through this. Or you're going to have a more dynamic syslog server that I'll collect them, I will read them, the system will read them, and if I see an alert, I will send you a notification via email, for instance, or send an alert. So this is where SolarWinds and all these things you pay money because they're going to have these rules. As you get the logs, look for the errors, look for the warnings, and do something with them. As opposed to us just have to look at this. They talk about the format. And basically, Cisco format normally is going to have the facility where it came from and information of the interface and the description. It's also important the time. So you're collecting the logs, make sure that they got the correct time that it's going to work for you. Is it going to be the uptime? Normally, we don't use uptime because that is all relevant. Normally, we use actually the real time. Now, are we going to use universal time or we're going to use time zone time, Pacific or East or UTC? How we're going to, so all those things that as administrator we have to decide. So when we read the logs, we'll know what we're reading. By default, it's the uptime, which is not really something practical because it may say like it happens 3 hours, like 3 hours, but when was 3 hours? The system rebooted. Now, the way that it's going to work is that syslog clients are going to be all on devices, firewalls, switches, routers, access points, all those other clients. And the syslog server could be an application that you purchase and then you install it on a server and it's going to start listening and basically just catching, so to speak, the logs because it's not going to authenticate. It's just open. Just send it to me. I'll collect them here. Right? So you can have multiple devices all sending logs to a syslog server. And the syslog server, when you configure it, basically we can just go log in the IP address of the syslog, done. Or you can specify some option here, like the level or the interface of the device, like you got multiple interfaces, which interface you want to use as a source. So, but basically the logs something like this. Logging on and the login information that will be sent to that. Now, this is critical. If you got a router, a switch, Cisco, this is kind of like default. We got to do this. We got to do this to do this. Questions on this one? And I'm going to do just one more section, then we stop there for the SNMP. The next one is important, the time. Make sure that the time is correct. So we use the network to get the time. And we're going to make sure that we use NTP to get the time into the system to get this. Right, and they configured this. Now, just in summary, so we can finish here, we went over the time here, is that all this is important. Collecting the logs, make sure that you got the right passwords, make sure that you have the correct configuration for SSH, make sure that you got physical access restricted. And they're talking about here doing it on a router. But you apply this, as I said, to your firewalls, to your access points, to your switches. This is kind of the default configuration when you do this. I got to do all these things. I got to configure SSH. I got to restrict it. I got to put a banner. I got to configure the time. So when I configure devices like a switch or router or firewall, this is my checklist. I got to put all these things. Make sure that the time is correct. Make sure that the SSH is correct. Make sure the management access is correct. And make sure the banner, all these things. Now, questions? A lot of information, huh? So what we did today normally will be done like in a regular semester in about 3-4 weeks. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to stop here.